psychological swagger comes from a belief system. So our belief in ourselves to accomplish a task. I take it a little bit more globally, but a belief in ourselves to be able to achieve even when the chips are down or we might be failing or struggling. So psychological swagger is how you show up for yourself and how you can internalize having some confidence and then overtly being able to demonstrate that. This is not fake it before you make it. I don't like that. I like confidence with credibility. It's okay to be vulnerable, but be vulnerable strategically and vulnerable with confidence.
Welcome to Leadership, the podcast where leadership meets real-world insights. In each episode, you can eavesdrop on exclusive conversations with top thought leaders, best-selling authors, and experts in leadership, communication, relationships, culture, and everything else that shapes your effectiveness in the workplace and in your personal life. Leadership is here for you. Now, here's our host, himself a seasoned coach and best-selling author, Dr. Roger Dean Duncan.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Leadership Podcast. These are interesting times in the world of work. Whether you show up at an office every day or you're working at home, there's a good chance you're expected to do more with less. Do you want to avoid being consumed with stuff that doesn't really matter? Do you want to spend less of your precious time on things that don't even count? Then Rob Fazio should be your new best friend. Rob is a licensed psychologist and a specialist in executive coaching, leadership development, and organizational success. With more than 20 years of experience advising Fortune 500 companies, he teaches people at every level on the corporate ladder how to achieve peak performance by simplifying complexity. He's a Wall Street Journal best-selling author and has been featured in media outlets like CNN, Fox News, my Forbes column, and many others. Rob's research-based approaches to workplace challenges may leave you thinking to yourself, wow, why didn't I think of that? So now's the perfect time to hear what Dr. Rob Fazio has to say. Rob, welcome to Leadership.
Thank you for the welcoming, and it's wonderful to have this conversation with you.
So happy to have you. I'd like to focus first on a book that you wrote about 10 years ago that seems to get more relevant with each passing day. It's titled, Simple is the New Smart. In a nutshell, what's the primary headline for that book, and how does your background in performance psychology shape your approach to people's work habits?
So throughout my career, I realized that human beings tend to make things more complex than they need to be. So if there's a new idea or a new piece of research, people often ruminate more than they get to apply it. So I thought to myself, there has to be an easier way to give people tools and resources that work, that have the theoretical underpinning or the research or the experience that can be applied right away. And so in coming up with the title and thinking through what I wanted this to be about, being a Sicilian, I think of meals often. And the three key components of a good meal is it has to be appetizing, it has to be something that is digestible and memorable for the good experience. And so the tips and tools that I talk about are those things. It's appetizing, something that people want and need. It's digestible because it's easy to remember in the format that I presented in. And it's memorable, something that when you leave the conversation, you're able to apply it right away and you don't have to think too much and you can make it a habit.
Well, Rob, you don't have a monopoly on that metaphor. I'm from Oklahoma, and I think of meals often, too, probably more than I should.
There you go.
Now, for people in leadership roles, what are some common habits that hinder rather than help?
The biggest habit that hinders performance and leadership is knowing something that needs to be done and turning a blind eye, or not taking the difficult action that needs to happen in order to push through an issue or to grow. And when you do that, temporarily it feels good because you relieve that stress or that pressure of learning something new or tough conversation, but everything gets hindered. The way we become better performers is extending our comfort zones and pushing through that struggle and making struggle part of our everyday work.
Well, what are some mental shortcuts or strategies that high performers use to stay focused?
Yeah, so I call them smart cuts. And
Yeah.
it's something that gets right to the point. So you identify what you want to accomplish, and then you want to make sure that you have a strategy or approach that you actually believe in. So, for example, difficult conversations is something that everyone wants coaching around. And what we know about difficult conversations is the biggest predictors of success are how you start and how you finish. And I believe also transitions. When you get stuck, how to get out them. So we talk about start, transition, and finishing. Very simple way that someone in 5 minutes could just think through that sequence and go into the conversation somewhat prepared. And then they develop that habit and they have more successful conversations.
That is a universal need. There's no doubt about that. Now, in a world of constant distractions, how can people stay aligned with their goals?
Yeah, this is a tough one because there's more noise out there than focus. And, we've all been doing this for years, but oftentimes thoughts creep in our minds that hook us and trigger us and pull us into different directions. So I heard Bob Eichenberg once said, he was talking about how important it is to take control of your mind. And so he talks about this idea of we all have reporters writing stories in our minds, and that story is always going to be out there. And it's very distracting and it can pull us away from our focus. But basically, we realize that and we create an editor and we say, okay, thank you for that information. I call my reporter Skip, and I say, Skip, thank you for all those thoughts. Thanks for all the information. Right now, I'm going to focus on my task at hand. The second strategy that I really like is I'm very big on the basics. So let's say my goal is to build more business. I will have a list of different business development behaviors, and I'll have my top one on an index card right in front of me. So when I hear noise and I get pulled away, I refocus and I say, okay, I'm just going to do this behavior to get me back in the flow of where I want to go, as opposed to getting pulled into somewhere I don't want to.
Yes, and when you mention stories, and we all have them, an important part of our success in any part of our lives is to be willing to challenge the stories that we have, challenge our own assumptions. And,
Yes.
and you do it by thanking Skip for the information, and then you move on. And I think that's a great way to do it. But a lot of people miss that. They didn't get that memo.
Yeah, they didn't get that memo, and it's our society reinforces it. So it's almost, we need to have a little force field around us where we intake so much information, and before we integrate it or associate a strong feeling with it, we have to check that first because it's just information. And then we need to become very good at deciding what we want to do with that information or if we want to release it.
Right. It's as though some people say, maybe not literally, but they're thinking, don't trouble me with the facts. I've already made up my mind.
Yes. Well, there's something to that. If you look at, elite athletes, people always talk about, how good they are in performance and such, but they give up an incredible amount of their lives in order to have that focus and mindset. And people think, oh, they're just in the flow. No, that's just a piece of it. It's the discipline, and it's what they've done and how they trained their minds and how much they've sacrificed to get to that elite level.
How can people apply the principle of simplicity to manage stress and avoid burnout?
Yeah, burnout is such a big topic. I think that the simple aspect is really being good at planning your day, your week, your month, and ensuring that you have a long-term goal and you make sure that you integrate enjoyable things along the path and also identify short wins to get some momentum. So I call it think less, right? It's long-term enjoyment and short-term wins. And so by having that pattern and doing that repetition with that balance between, okay, I know where I want to go, I've got work to do to accomplish my goals, but I'm going to integrate enjoyable things that I like to do at work or in my role that can help me get a recharge. And there's some great work around burnout by a gentleman named Karasik. And he identifies demands and support around things that really lead to burnout. So we can't always impact the organizational demands, but we can get support. Oh, and the third factor is control. How much control? So the more control you can have over your day, even if you have a tough boss or whatnot, the more control you have over your thinking and how you approach things, the less likely you are to burn out. Now, Roger, I also think there are often times where that's not the case. And I really love the work Bob Sternberg has done around successful intelligence. And I simplify that to three aspects. Fight or flight. So if you're in a situation or in a role where it's a fit, great. Using these habits will work naturally. If it's not, and you've got to fight, which is push back in the environment or try to change the culture, it's very difficult. But if you can't influence that, then you're going to have to flight, get a different role or do something, because that's what leads to burnout. Just that constant wear of you not being in a role where you can use your strengths and enjoy it. And that just wears on us. And then we also bring that home.
Yes, and it may sound harsh, but it seems to me that burnout is a choice. Now, nobody would choose to be burnt out, but they do choose the small things throughout the day that cumulatively over time lead to burnout. So what you're saying, I think, is that we need to be more conscious and more mindful and more deliberate and more intentional about everything we do throughout the day, because it produces patterns and then that produces results.
Yes, Roger. I agree 100%. And I'm in the camp of saying the less popular things that are true. So yes, there's an aspect of burnout that is uncontrollable. But there's a whole nother aspect of it. What choices are you making daily? And if you're in a situation that is so bad for your health and everything, you've got to find a way to get out of it. And it's not simple and it's not easy, but it is doable. And I like the word intentional, deliberate, right? So, take 5 minutes every day and be deliberate. Maybe it's being deliberate around how you're going to get out of this situation in 2-3 years. But if you are ending up in the same situation in 3 years, then that says also a lot about you. And you might have created the pathways where you're more comfortable with not taking action. And that leads to a lot of challenges.
Yes, absolutely. So what seems to be the most common mental block that people face when trying to simplify their approach to success?
I think the biggest mental block is the stories that we tell ourselves. So growing up, right, everyone has given us stories and we've embedded those. And then we tell ourselves stories in any given situations. You can go into a situation and automatically be saying to yourself some narrative or some story that is putting you in a situation where you're not likely to be successful. So being aware of what story you're telling yourself and making sure you're checking that is very big, because that changes your mindset. And I'd rather you focus on the things that you can control and deliver on, as opposed to all the noise that's going on in your mind. So I see that being the most common hindrance. And interestingly enough, most people aren't really aware how much we talk to ourselves, right? We all do it, and we can tweak the story. We really can. I still to this day do affirmations at night before I go to bed. When I want to accomplish something, I say to myself that I'm good at it, I'm effective, I've already accomplished it, and although it might be tough, I'm going to get there. And that has worked for me.
Sure. Well, now you write about something that you call psychological swagger. What exactly is that, and how does it differ from cockiness?
Yeah. Also an unpopular term, intentionally. Now, the word swagger has some negative connotations to it. So cockiness typically at the core comes from insecurity. Psychological swagger comes from a belief system similar to Alfred Bandura's work around self-efficacy. So our belief in ourselves to accomplish a task, I take it a little bit more globally, but a belief in ourselves to be able to achieve even when the chips are down or we might be failing or struggling. So psychological swagger is how you show up for yourself and how you can internalize having some confidence and then overtly being able to demonstrate that. This is not fake it before you make it. I don't like that. I like confidence with credibility. It's okay to be vulnerable, but be vulnerable strategically and vulnerable with confidence.
Makes sense. So, what lessons can people in the business world learn from some of the world-class athletes you've worked with?
I was having a conversation with someone who works with Olympic skiers, and we were talking about this, and where we came out was the biggest thing that when working with an athlete that translates to the business world is people get in their own way. So the best athletes will say, I know I have the physical ability, right? But I didn't realize how many barriers I have and I create for myself. So that might be anxiety. It might be unneeded pressure. And all those things decrease the muscle memory that you've created. And you get in the way of your flow physically. So that translates wonderfully to the business world because, we call them insecure overachievers. People have a very high performance motive and strong personalities. Going underneath that is they're beating themselves up and they're taking in information, and you've got to be able to filter out that and focus on really what's important.
One of your book chapters has the provocative title, Listening is Bad for Your Health. If you would, explain that to us and tell us how that applied to Walt Disney and Oprah.
Well, first of all, thank you for thoroughly reading the book. That's great. It's bringing back memories for me. So
you ought to read it. It's a good book.
Yeah, when you said we were talking about it, I was like, I went back and read some chapters. Like, oh, interesting. This is actually my favorite chapter. And my wife for years was a chair of communication department. And when she saw the title of that chapter, she cringed. She hated it, right? Because listening is such a core of building relationships and learning and growing. My point is, along the way growing up, we all internalize messages. So I'll use myself as the first example. I was told that I wasn't smart. I was told never to apply for graduate school. I was told I'd never get a doctorate. Don't even try because of my GRE scores, my traditional intelligence, and the way I thought. And I don't know why. I have a weird brain. It just fueled me. And I took it as like, oh, okay, I'll figure it out. And it was a hard path, but I figured it out. Had I not had that aspect of that part of me to ignore that noise and those negative things, I would have gone through life not trying. Every once in a while, it does resurface, like something is hard or difficult. I say, maybe I'm not smart, right? And then I have to kind of catch myself and reframe. So the Walt Disney and Oprah examples are great ones. Two incredibly successful people, obviously. Oprah was told by our boss she has no talent and was really demeaned and clicked out. So you can imagine how inaccurate that was. And then Walt Disney is my favorite example. He was told by a boss and was fired because he was not innovative and lacked big idea thinking.
I hope that boss hung around for a few years.
Yeah, right. I know. Yeah, it is incredible. Walt Disney, when you read more about him, he not only had the innovation, but the detail. I was just reading how they keep mosquitoes out of Disney World and how they do everything so perfectly and kind of under the scenes. And it's just all brilliant to create an experience.
Well, sometimes, of course, so-called negative feedback can call our attention to dangerous blind spots. How can a person know what feedback to use in course correction and what feedback to ignore. How do you know the difference?
Yeah. So the biggest thing with feedback is humans are naturally resistant to getting feedback that does not align with our perception of ourselves. So I don't care who you are. We all have protective factors. And even if someone joyfully says thank you and everything, it still stings a little bit, right? There's things that are going on in your brain to protect yourself. And what I want people to realize is I want you to embrace that and realize that's part of development and growth. And so the first thing you want to do is always seek to understand what the feedback is about. And first, forget about where it's coming from, especially if it's someone you don't like. Because what you want to really do is find some value in the feedback. Can this be helpful to me? Would it be helpful I applied this? And the other thing is, I believe that there is feedback that is based on other people's priorities and other people's agendas, or they may not have insight into what you're trying to accomplish. So if you have a piece of feedback that you are thinking that you may not want to integrate, you always are kind to the person who gave you and you say, I'm going to think about that and see about integrating it. What I advise is finding 2 to 3 people that are credible and very candid and ask them what they think about the feedback in relation to you, and just have that conversation before you decide to dump the feedback.
Yes, I have found it helpful if somebody were to say, for example, that presentation you gave was good. Rather than just saying thank you and leaving it, I'm inclined to say, well, I appreciate that. Tell me specifically what was helpful to you. And
Yes.
then after they do that, I might say, now tell me that's been very helpful. Tell me specifically, what could I have done differently that would have made it even more helpful to you?
Yes.
Then you're getting feedback that you can really apply. You're also telling that other person that it's perfectly okay to be totally open and candid with you.
It's wonderful for many reasons. One of which, if you were in an organization and you were the boss, you're trying to normalize and make it comfortable for people to have conversations.
Right.
So I think you had Marshall Goldsmith on once.
Yes.
He's brilliant in many ways, but I've really adopted a lot of what he does around feed forward. And I just frame it as advice, right? The word feedback is just a lightning rod for people feeling bad and awkward. So I encourage people to practice giving advice to one another on something they want advice about. And that kind of just changes the tone and the context or the messages that we're delivering. And it isn't so heavy because it's people trying to be helpful to you. And then when it's advice, neither person is ego involved in it.
Right.
Your change initiative has the budget. The strategy looks solid, and everyone's nodding along in the meetings, but for some reason, it's going nowhere. Dr. Roger Dean Duncan knows why. After 40 years in the trenches with top business leaders, he knows that change fails when organizations lack the right foundations: trust, accountability, and real communication. Dr. Duncan's free 10-minute assessment shows you exactly where your organization stands. Answer a few straightforward questions that reveal your true change readiness level. Don't waste months discovering the hard way. Get your free assessment today at leadershop.net/change. Again, that's leadershop.net/change.
Now, related to that, a lot of people seem to be talking about self-awareness these days, especially in commenting on someone else's lack of it.
Yeah.
Now, how would you define self-awareness, and what role does it play in a leader's effectiveness?
Self-awareness is huge. I mean, I did a lot of work around emotional intelligence and, in graduate school and everything. And that was always at the core of everything and effective leadership. And the best way I could sum it up, and then I'll get into a little bit more detail, is I once heard someone say, I've never seen a leader fix something that was broken without being aware of it. Right? So the awareness is huge. And the classic example is, you're out to dinner and either your teeth are all red because of wine or you've got a piece of broccoli, and people may not be brave enough to see it. So until you go to the restroom or something and look in the mirror, you don't even know that that's going on. It is the foundation for leadership, and it's incredibly important. And the most important thing is to realize awareness is not a one-stop shop. It is a consistent learning pattern. And I think as we get more seasoned and we grow more, if we don't do this intentionally, we will close off and be like, oh, I kind of know how to do this. I've done it for 25 years. And we stop learning and our blind spots get bigger. And Roger, I think there was a second part to the question. I'm sorry.
How do you define self-awareness? And what role does it play in a leader's effectiveness?
I define self-awareness as understanding your tendencies, understanding your weaknesses and your triggers so you can better accomplish your goals as well as help people help themselves. And the way it plays out for leaders is that you often make more missteps than step on landmines when trying to lead if you're not aware of yourself, and even just as important, aware of your impact of others. And it's a cycle of insight, right, and influence, and identifying the gap between your intention and the actual impact, and keep taking through that cycle.
And I especially like what you said about, and these are my words, not yours, it's a constant challenge to be self-aware. You can't just check off the box and say, okay, I'm self-aware. You need to constantly be aware of the need to be aware.
Yes, exactly. And we can lose that. I see seasoned leaders lose that the more successful they come. So that self-awareness may got them there, but they don't keep nurturing that.
Exactly. Now, Rob, you write about paying people with their motivational currency. It's certainly true that different people may be motivated by different things. What are your tips for navigating in that terrain?
Yeah, so motivational currency is something that really took on a life of its own just about 10 or 11 years. And I set out to try to find something that was a combination of situational leadership and motivation and engaging people. And I use it a lot around influencing. Some people say it's very similar to the love languages. And the theoretical underpinning is David McClelland's social motives. So we all have code going on underneath us, and that drives our behavior. So the more aware we are of our own, the more effective we can be at influencing and engaging people. So recognition is understanding yourself, reading is understanding in others, and leading is adapting to be more effective at your communication style. The way that I think it's really helpful to people is they think before they act, and they act on what they think. So again, it's very intentional, because our natural instinct when we are trying to influence or lead, we go with what feels comfortable to us, which is a terrible communication strategy. And as pressure goes up, we still go back to our default. So in motivational currency, there's 4 core motivators: performance, people, power, and purpose. They're all equally good, but we typically have a primary motivator. So to your point around self-awareness, the more aware we are of our primary motivator, the more able we are to adapt, maybe tone it down so we can use a different motivator to connect with someone.
And sometimes in a conversation, a pregnant pause can be very helpful. Just take a moment, just a couple of seconds maybe, to think through what you are about to say and the impact that you would hope it would have on the other person. A lot of people forget to do that.
I feel like you've been talking to my wife and got some feedback on me.
No.
That pause is, one of the greatest simple skill that we have. It connects you more with the people. Our limbic systems are more connected because you're sending the message that you respect the other person, and that goes a long way.
Yes.
It also demonstrates that you have intelligence, right? Because you're being thoughtful and mindful.
Right. You care.
Yes.
Now, a leader's ability to persuade clearly has a direct impact on team effectiveness. You recommend a success framework that you call the persuasion pyramid. Tell us what that is and how it works.
Yeah. So when people go to persuade, they think of it as an action that they're doing to someone else. And persuasion is really a dance. And it's a dance around intentionality. And so the three factors of the persuasion pyramid are confidence, competence, and comfort. And that trilogy is a cycle. And so you want confidence and belief in yourself in whatever conversation that you're going to have, that you'll be able to have that. And the confidence is having the skill sets to engage with people, listen effectively, naturally redirect conversations, knowing when to be overt or more subtle. And then the comfort is you having some ease and some quiet confidence and calmness. And what that does is doing those three things help the other person be more at ease. And it actually disarms people and they're more comfortable. And you can have more fruitful conversations and be more persuasive.
It seems to me that this is another example of how a simple framework, remembered and used, can make a huge difference in relationships and accomplishment.
That's exactly the point. You got it.
Now, let's focus on something you wrote about in another of your books more recently. It's called bully proof. What exactly do you mean by the term bully proof?
Bully proof is a term I use to help people understand the importance of taking ownership in any given situation. You can have skills and you can decide how you respond to something. So when you are attacked in a situation, people's immediate reactions are either to be submissive and passive or attack and be dominant. And all that does is give the person that is bullying and engaging that behavior more power because they're the ones that are always fighting in this arena. And so the worst metaphor here is when a bully punches you in the face, punch them back. That's the worst advice ever because they're better boxers. So we have to find a way to change that dynamic. So bully proof is around being selective. And on that continuum of being submissive or dominant and attacking, there's two other what I call strength styles. One of them is subtle strength, which is using calm confidence to demonstrate backbone and respect. And the other one is overt confidence, which is about being assertive. Those two are non-emotional reactions, and we're not giving away power. We're not letting it be okay to be pushed around, but we're taking ownership of how we respond, and that tends to be more effective for the long term.
Well, Rob, how common is it for someone to be a bully and not even realize it?
Incredibly common. When I sought out to do some research and to think about this topic, I knew that there was going to be a lot of information around people bullying. But to the self-awareness point, raising awareness is very tricky. So your classic clients that are have really strong personalities, could be a surgeon or, someone who just has that strong personality, they'll often say, this is going to be great for my boss. And so what they don't realize is there's a little twist where I ask people about 27 behaviors. I say, hey, identify which behaviors, and somebody who thinks of bully, which one do they do? And I go, oh gosh, there's so many. And there's a continuum of how much bullying behavior you engage in. And then I say, okay, now I want you to be honest. Go back and think of yourself and how many of these behaviors you engage in. And sure enough, most people end up medium or high because we also unintentionally engage in bullying behavior and don't realize we could really throw off someone's workday by doing these behaviors.
So you're saying that bullying is not necessarily deliberate, but the effect is the same.
Yes, exactly. But when it's deliberate, it's much worse, much more abusive, and much more damaging.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you've studied this. What are the costs of workplace bullying to the people who experience it and to their organizations? The
costs are huge. And depending on whose data you look at, I look a lot at workplace initiatives. They've got a lot of good research. And then there's all these kind of bullying consortiums. But it depends how you calculate it. So let me say the first answer is billions and billions of dollars. So we know because of turnover and absenteeism, an employee leaving the company because of being bullied, which is about a 65% rate if someone's truly bullied, they're gonna leave. That's about maybe 300 grand to lose an employee, depending on their salary, for all the costs of that. We all know that.
Sure.
However, what people don't calculate is the ripple impact. So let's say I bully someone one day. That person then goes and tells their best work friend about being bullied. Now we've got two people who are distraught and not focusing on work. Then that second person goes and tells another person. Now there's about 10 people in their workday who are thinking about Steve or Josie who just got bullied and how wrong it is. And now we're feeling negatively towards the person. And it becomes, I call a swirl sabotage, because then we also go home and we talk about it at a dinner table. We might displace our anger or something and treat our kids a certain way. And now we're thinking more about being bullied than work. So there's cost estimates up to $1 million per person that gets bullied in the workplace because of the loss of productivity.
It also damages the credibility of the bully's boss.
Yes.
Because, you're thinking, why doesn't he or she notice that this person is a total jerk? And if they do notice it, why are they letting it continue? It's like a virus. It just takes over the culture.
Here's the most upsetting thing I found about true bullies. These are people that are intentionally doing things that are pushy and they're win at all costs and they don't care.
Right.
I think that I am pretty well versed in this and I'm feeling good. And I can't tell you how many senior executives I work with that know there's bullying behavior and say, I can't touch it because they're a valuable contributor to the business. Or other members of the C-suite. I've had some heated conversations about this. People leave and people need more courage, Roger, to get that person out. I mean, Bob Sutton's work on the no a-hole rule is brilliant. If you don't do that, then you have a culture of submission and everyone thinking more about dysfunction than function.
Right. Now, you coach people who experience bullying to exchange the victim view for the ownership view. Explain to us how that works.
Another very unpopular stance by me. Because you're taught all through life, don't blame the victim. So I don't blame the victim, but I want them to take ownership and I want them to understand if they in any way are contributing to giving permission to someone to let them bully you. And so, for example, if you aren't good not getting triggered into that attack or being submissive response, it's kind of like a drug for bullies and jerks. They feed off it. It gives them epinephrine, right? It's like exciting to them. And the taking ownership part is redirecting your energy from, oh my God, this is happening to me. I can't believe it's happening to me. Can you believe this person did that too? How can I better understand what I'm getting off? And if I'm doing nothing wrong and doing it right, what can I do to make myself more bully-proof? So some of that is really building alliances with credible, strong personalities that would be willing to support you. And that goes a long way. So taking that action and the victim, cycle, is very powerful. And once we say to ourselves, why is this happening to me? And it's not fair, we're losing because we're not thinking about, okay, accepting this is going on. What can I do about it? Let me be thoughtful. Let me think about it. Although it does not condone the behavior, no one is going to fix it for us unless we start to fix it for ourselves. And furthermore, when we talk about it to people in our alliance or our bosses, if we go in with the mentality of, oh, this person's doing this to me, this, that, as opposed to going in, hey, here's been my experience. Here's what I'm thinking about. Here's what I'm trying. Can you be a thought partner on this? You're going to get more effort and support.
Well, how can a leader help create a culture that's both user-friendly and highly productive? In other words, a culture that cultivates and rewards both positive behaviors, no bullying, and strong collaborative performance. What can the leader do to help create that kind of culture?
The number one thing is a zero tolerance for introvert, dysfunctional bullying behavior. That's the number one thing. It happens, you address it, it happens again. No matter how much damage it does to the business, that person needs to be let go, because you can't coach character. And if that entrenched behavior is there and you've done your due diligence, right, the damage it is going to do to the rest of their workforce is greater than any value that that one person is going to bring over time. There's also an element of how valuable and important credibility is as a leader. And having that courage, to listen and to take action on behavior, on things that are going to be less popular to the boss's boss, right? And to take that courage to stand up for someone. When you do that, you create such followership for the lifetime of you being a leader, and people are more engaged and want to work with you and for you. I think the other thing is, doing things where you can equip people slowly and surely and help them accomplish their goals and build their confidence. And doing that through 3 dimensions: support and challenge. So supporting people, but also really giving them a kick and a nudge and challenging them to grow.
Well, it seems like it always goes back to being more deliberate and intentional with your leadership.
Yes.
Being very clear about what kind of culture, what kind of environment do you want. And it's not going to happen automatically. It's going to be the result of certain behaviors over and over and over, and reinforcement.
Yeah. Yes. That's back to the athletes. Discipline, right? That's a key factor that's very underrated and underused.
Well, finally, Rob, on a more personal note, you are president of a nonprofit organization called Hold the Door Open for Others. If you would, tell us the story behind that organization and share with us the organization's core principles and how they inspire the work that you do today.
It is a movement and a purpose very, very dear to my life. And I've learned a lot that helps me out in my work life as well. So my dad was a senior executive in New York City, and he was in the World Trade Center on the 994. And unfortunately, he didn't make it home. However, we researched his steps and found out that one of his last acts was one of kindness, where he was holding the door to tell people to get out and go home and don't go back to work, even though over the PA systems in Tower 2, they were saying stay. And so, you think of something to be proud of and character. It's such a great way to have a metaphor and inspiration for my life, for my kids, and then other people. So when that happened, I made a decision, my family made a decision, we wanted to do something. I wanted to do something more than a scholarship because I wanted it to be something that has lasting impact. And I am not someone who believes that coping is enough. I believe you have to match grief and trauma with growth. So we set out to find ways to empower, challenge, and equip people to grow through loss, trauma, and adversity. Again, a very unpopular stance, but right after 9/11, especially on that first anniversary, we're putting out resources to help people realize they can have post-traumatic growth while they're dealing with the toughest times in their life. And it gave people some sensible hope. And sometimes it relieves the pressure, not ignoring the trauma, but helping people realize how powerful our minds and beings and our support is, that we can actually grow through one of the greatest traumas of our lifetimes. And you'll notice you can see back there, there's a green door. That's a nod to my dad, and a Reese's little jar there. The Reese's story is one of where, when we were looking for my dad in New York City, we were at the Armory, And everyone kept saying, we saw him and everything. And his favorite candy was Reese's peanut butter cups. So one of my friends said, let's put on the flyer, if found, please feed Reese's peanut butter cups. And the media picked up on that. They loved the levity. As people were crying, they were laughing. And my 9-year-old daughter named Reese.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
that's sweet. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a great memory, and, talk about being anchored to a purpose inside and outside of work. The other interesting aspect, Roger, my dad, worked for a very difficult bully boss for years, very manipulative. And he never talked about it, but my Italian mom certainly did. And so I saw him come home and be stressed out. And I didn't realize it, but I became obsessed of giving people who felt powerless how to gain some power. And I think that's why I got into kind of executive development and executive coaching.
Well, bless you, Rob. And oh, by the way, you are plenty smart to go to graduate school and get a PhD, just so you know.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Rob. Your insights have been both instructive and inspiring, and we really appreciate your joining us. To learn more about Rob and his work, go to onpointadvising.com. That's onpointadvising.com. And to grab a free copy of my book, Change Friendly Leadership, go to changefriendly.com. That's changefriendly.com. In other episodes of Leadership, I share my exclusive conversations with top thought leaders who offer smart tips to boost your effectiveness in both your professional and personal life. My guests include superstars like Stephen M.R. Covey, Liz Wiseman, Doug Conant, Heather Younger, Marshall Goldsmith, Amy Edmondson, Bill George, Jessica Chen, Guy Kawasaki, Dana Perino, David Ulrich, and many others who have insightful things to say that you can put to good use immediately. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you can stay informed on what's coming your way. Trust me, folks, you don't want to miss any of our episodes. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time, stay safe, be happy, and spread good cheer wherever you go. For Leadership, I'm Roger Dean Duncan.